Hello everyone! Last video of the week for our little house. Today we're reading Chapter 8, Part 2, Dance at Grandpa's. We get to enjoy the dance. Alright, and we only have one vocab word today. Our only vocab word is patty pan. Patty pan? What could that be? A patty pan is a specific kind of pan that is made to make like little cupcakes. It's kind of a mix between a cupcake and a cookie. It's really shallow, kind of like the top of a muffin, kind of like a whoop, like a contact lens. Whoop, it's kind of just like that. And it's just to make little flat cakes. So that's a patty pan, and they talk about it in our story today. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. Don't forget to have your notes if you need to take your notes during the reading. Okay, so we just left off when Uncle George, when the dance has started, everyone has been arriving, and Uncle George played his bugle, and Pa was just taking his fiddle out. Then Pa took his fiddle out of its box and began to play, and all the couples stood in squares on the floor and began to dance when Pa called the figures. Grand right, grand left, Pa called out, and all the skirts began to twirl, and all the boots began to stamp. The circles went round and round, all the skirts going one way, and all the boots going the other way, and hands clasping and parting up right up in the air. Swing your partners, Pa called, and each gent bowed to the lady on the left. They all did as Pa said. Laura watched Ma's skirt swaying and her little waist bending and her dark head bowing, and she thought Ma was the loveliest dancer in the world. The fiddle was singing, "Oh, you Buffalo gals, are you coming out tonight? Are you coming out tonight? Are you coming out tonight? Oh, Buffalo gals, aren't you coming out tonight to dance by the light of the moon?" The little circles and the big circles went round and round, and the skirts swirled, and the boots stamped, and partners bowed and separated and met and bowed again. In the kitchen, Grandma was all by herself, stirring the boiling syrup in the big brass kettle. She stirred in time to the music. By the back door was a pail of clean snow, and sometimes Grandma took a spoonful of syrup from the kettle and poured it on some of the snow in a saucer. Laura watched the dancers again. Pa was playing the Irish washerwoman. Now he called, "Do-si-do," or "Do-si ladies, do-si-do, come down heavy on your heel and toe." Laura could not hold her feet still. Uncle George looked at her and laughed. Then he caught her by the hand and did a little dance with her. In the corner, she liked Uncle George after all. All right, let me try to get that for you so you can see. There's Laura with Uncle George and Pa and Grandma in the back cooking in the kitchen. So fun. Everybody was laughing over by the kitchen door. They were dragging Grandma in from the kitchen. Grandma's dress was beautiful too. A dark blue calico with autumn-colored leaves scattered over it. Her cheeks were pink from laughing, and she was shaking her head. The wooden spoon was in her hand still. "I can't leave the syrup," she said. But Pa began to play the Arkansas Traveler, and everyone began to clap in time to the music. So Grandma bowed to them all and did a few steps by herself. She could dance as prettily as any of them. The clapping almost drowned the music of Pa's fiddle. Suddenly, Uncle George did a pigeon wing, and bowing low before Grandma, he began to jig. Grandma tossed her spoon to somebody. She put her hands on her hips and faced Uncle George, and everybody shouted. Grandma was jigging. Laura clapped her hands in time to the music. With all the other clapping hands, the fiddle sang as it had never sung before. Grandma's eyes were snapping, and her cheeks were red. And underneath her skirts, her heels were clicking as fast as the thumping of George's boots. Everybody was excited. Uncle George kept on jigging, and Grandma kept on facing him, jigging too. The fiddle did not stop. Uncle George began to breathe loudly, and he wiped sweat off his forehead. Grandma's eyes twinkled. "You can't beat her, George," somebody shouted. Uncle George jigged faster. He jigged twice as fast as he had been jigging. So did Grandma. Everybody cheered again. All the women were laughing and clapping their hands, and all the men were teasing George. George did not care, but he did not have breath enough to laugh. He was jigging. Pa's blue eyes were snapping and sparkling. He was standing up, watching George and Grandma, and the bow danced over the fiddle strings. Laura jumped up and down and squealed and clapped her hands. Grandma kept on jigging. Her hands were on her hips and her chin was up and she was smiling. George kept on jigging, but his boots did not thump as loudly as they had thumped at first. Grandma's heels kept on clickety-clacking gaily. A drop of sweat dripped off George's forehead and shone on his cheek. All at once he threw both arms and gasped, "I'm beat!" He stopped jigging. Everybody made a terrific noise. Woohoo! Shouting and cheering and yelling and stamping, cheering on Grandma. Grandma jigged just a little minute longer. Then she stopped. She laughed and gasped. Her eyes sparkled just like Pa's when he laughed. George was laughing too and wiping his forehead on his sleeve. Suddenly, Grandma stopped laughing. She turned and ran as fast as she could into the kitchen. The fiddle had stopped playing. All the women were talking at once, and all the men teasing George. But everybody was still for a minute when Grandma looked like that. Then she came to the door, and between the kitchen and the big room she said, "The syrup is waxing. Come and help yourselves." Then everybody began to talk and laugh again. Whew! They all hurried to the kitchen for plates and outdoors to fill their plates with snow. The kitchen door was open and the cold air came in. Outdoors the stars were frosty in the sky, and the air nipped Laura's cheeks and nose. Her breath was like smoke. She and the other Laura and all the other children scooped up clean snow with their plates. Then they went back into the crowded kitchen. Grandma stood by the brass kettle, and with a big wooden spoon she poured hot syrup on each plate of snow. It cooled into soft candy, and as fast as it cooled, they ate it. They could eat all they wanted, for maple sugar never hurt anybody. There was plenty of syrup in the kettles, and plenty of snow outdoors. As soon as they ate one plateful, they filled their plates with snow again, and Grandma poured more syrup on it. When they had eaten soft maple candy until they could eat no more of it, then they helped themselves from the long table loaded with pumpkin pies and dried berry pies and cookies and cakes. There was salt rising bread, too, and cold boiled pork and pickles. Ooh! How sour the pickles were. They all ate till they could hold no more, and then they began to dance again. But Grandma watched the syrup in the kettle. Many times she took a little out into the saucer and stirred it round and round. Then she shook her head and poured the syrup back into the kettle. Let me show you all their food. Nice spread. I'd love some yummy pie. The other room was loud and merry with the music of the fiddle and the noise of the dancing. At last, as Grandma stirred the syrup in the saucer, turned into little grains like sand, and Grandma called, "Quick, girls, it's graining!" Aunt Ruby and Aunt Dosha and Ma left the dance and came running. They set out pans, big pans, little pans, and as fast as Grandma filled them with the syrup, they set out more. They set and filled ones away to cool into maple sugar. Then Grandma said, "Now bring the patty pans for the children." There was a patty pan, or at least a broken cup or a saucer, for every little girl and boy. They all watched anxiously while Grandma ladled out the syrup. Perhaps there would not be enough. Then somebody would have to be unselfish and polite. There was just enough syrup to go around. The last scrapings of the brass kettle exactly filled the very last patty pan. Nobody was left out. The fiddling and the dancing went on and on. Laura and the other Laura stood around and watched the dancers. Then they sat down on the floor in the corner and watched. The dancing was so pretty and the music so happy that Laura knew she could never get tired of it. All the beautiful skirts went swirling by, and the boots went stamping, and the fiddle kept on singing happily. Then Laura woke up. She was lying across the foot of Grandpa's bed. It was morning. Ma and Grandma and baby Carrie were in the bed. Pa and Grandpa were sleeping rolled up in blankets on the floor by the fireplace. Mary was nowhere in sight. She was sleeping with Aunt Dosha and Aunt Ruby in their bed. That was it. So soon everybody was getting up. There were pancakes and maple syrup for breakfast, and then Pa brought the horses and sled to the door. He helped Ma and Carrie in while Grandpa picked up Mary and Uncle George picked up Laura, and they tossed them over the edge of the sled into the straw. Pa tucked in the robes around them, and Grandpa and Grandma and Uncle George stood calling goodbye, goodbye, as they rode away into the big woods, going home. The sun was warm, and the trotting horses threw up bits of muddy snow with their hooves. Behind the sled, Laura could see their footprints, and every footprint had gone through the thin snow into the mud. Before night, Pa said, we'll see the last of the sugar snow. And that's it. All right. So we had an exciting party in Chapter 8, right? We had some good food. We talked about some candy, how they made maple syrup, and a pretty interesting chapter, I thought. So Chapter 8, we finished Chapter 8. Go ahead, finish up your quiz, and don't forget about your picture on the back of your note page, and your four notes, and your one vocab word, patty pan, down in the description, okay? All right, that's it for Chapter 8. I'll see you guys later. Bye.